name is Millie and I have OCD. That's a little bit different from my normal introduction, but that's because this week is OCD Awareness Week and I wanted to share some of my experiences with OCD. If this is your first time on my channel, then hi, welcome to the Performing Arts and Me. My name is Millie and I'm a musical theatre graduate from London Studio Centre, and before I did my 3-year degree at London Studio Centre, I did a 1-year foundation course at Bird College. I think it was in the gap between Bird and LSC that I started to think that I might have OCD, but it wasn't until my 2nd year of my degree that I decided to actually seek help for it. And I think it was kind of from the end of the summer holidays after my 2nd year that I started therapy, and then that continued on through the first part of 3rd year, so maybe the first half of 3rd year or thereabouts. Okay, so my therapy that I had was a talking therapy on the NHS, and it used a combination of CBT, which is cognitive behavioural, oh my gosh, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, and ERP therapy, which is exposure response prevention therapy. I found my therapy very useful. Now, I am not cured of OCD now, but I have improved, and I also got the tools to be able to continue making progress towards reducing my OCD. Now, I actually haven't been very good at making time for doing this lately, so this here is my commitment to myself that I will make more time to work on tackling my OCD from now going forward to the end of the year. I am now going to talk a little bit more about some of what OCD has involved for me, which will involve me talking about OCD behaviours. So if you don't want to hear that, then skip ahead. I'll put a timestamp as to where you can skip ahead to. Okay, so in the media, someone with OCD is often portrayed as being someone who likes being clean, tidy and or organised. I do not think that this is an accurate representation of OCD, but where the confusion can come in is someone with OCD can exhibit behaviours of being clean, tidy and or organised. But the best description I've seen of the distinction between someone with OCD and someone who likes being clean, tidy and or organised is that with OCD it's not that someone likes those things, it's that someone needs those things. There are also other OCD themes that don't involve being clean, tidy and or organised, which are probably not as well known because of the media portrayal that we have. For example, one of the themes that I struggle with is moral OCD, or sometimes it's called scrupulosity. I'm going to give a few examples of this in action. Some of these I am actually a little bit embarrassed to share because I know how silly they sound, but I'm going to share them anyway. I am much better than this now. Remember, I have improved since having therapy, but I think it's important to share what OCD can look like in ways that are not portrayed by the media because it's not as glamorous as it's sometimes portrayed as. Okay, so one example is, so sometimes when I was submitting assignment, the particular instance that I'm thinking of I think happened in 2nd year, I remember getting really stressed out over whether I had the full stops correct in my references. But this isn't because I wanted it to be perfect and I didn't want to lose marks. No. The reason I wanted to make sure the full stops were in my references in the right place was because if I didn't have them in the right place, then I wasn't referencing correctly. And if I wasn't referencing correctly, I felt like I was cheating because I was using someone else's work in my work, referencing it and putting it in my bibliography. I'm talking about the bibliography here. I was using someone else's work in my work, and then if I wasn't doing the credits in the bibliography correctly, in my mind that was kind of like wasn't giving them due acknowledgement, and therefore because I wasn't crediting them properly, it felt like I was cheating. That's example number 1. Example number 2 I think is the worst one. This was before I thought I had OCD, and no one at the time suggested it could be OCD. People were concerned for me, but no one suggested it could be OCD. And I think it's partly because of the misinformation around OCD and what it involves, and that it always looks a certain way, which it doesn't. So I did my A-levels during COVID, and so our official exams were cancelled and we had teacher assessed grades. And I found this very difficult because different schools across the country did things slightly differently. I was like, well, this isn't fair because it's not universal, and because it wasn't universal across the whole country, I felt like I might be being unfairly advantaged. For example, we had mini exams, and for our maths exams they told us some topics that weren't going to come up so that we didn't need to spend our time revising them, and I was like, well, that's unfair because some other school in somewhere else in the country might have been told to revise all the subjects, so I've therefore got a better chance of getting a better grade than them, so that's advantaging me and that's unfair. And I wrote an email of, there must have been, I don't know, 20 things per email. I did 3 subjects, so 60 things that I felt like I had been unfairly advantaged, and so it was cheating for me to get whatever grade I got. I can't remember if I sent these emails before or after I got my grades. I did get a phone call from the deputy head of sixth form to check that I was okay and to reassure me that everything was fine, but no one suggested that this was OCD. My parents saw all of this as well. They didn't suggest it was OCD. And I don't know if that is just because that's not what OCD is normally portrayed as, but looking back now, that was 100% an OCD behaviour. And this was probably my most extreme example of OCD affecting my life. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the next theme because I've been talking for ages. So my other main theme that I struggle with is the contamination OCD, which is a little bit more seen in the media, although not always portrayed accurately, which for me is mainly to do with hand washing and cleanliness, especially around food and around preventing illness. And this is the one that people who know me would probably notice the most. If you lived with me, you'd 100% notice this, although I probably would tell you that I had OCD because you're going to notice. 3 examples for this. At one point, I think this was in my first year, I wouldn't touch the washing up bottle whilst I was washing up to pour out like fairy liquid or whatever onto the sponge, because the bottle would have been handled by someone who hadn't washed their hands to put the washing up liquid on their sponge or whatever, and so I didn't want to touch that whilst I was washing up, or if I did touch it then I would wash my hands. That was quite bad actually, now I come to think of it. And that's just one example of like what cooking and cleaning in the kitchen used to look like for me. This next one is one that I still have a slight issue with, which is touching handles properly, and I'm talking kitchen cupboard door handles and toilet door handles. I often open kitchen cupboard door handles with my little finger, and I think part of that is now just muscle memory because I've done it for so long, but particularly in the past, maybe slightly now, I don't know, I used to feel like I could feel that one of my fingers was dirty. So I'd open a cupboard door with my little finger, and then this would be my dirty finger. So I could still eat and do food stuff with these 4 fingers and this hand, but this would be my dirty finger, and then if this touched anything or the other fingers, then they would have to be washed. My final example is to do with my room. My room is often a mess, and sometimes it would be messier because of my OCD, which sounds contradictory because people think of OCD as being to do with cleaning and tidying, but for me, my room would actually often be messier because of my OCD. For example, if there was a tissue on the floor, I knew that if I picked up the tissue and put it in the bin, I would want to wash my hands, and there's only so many times a day one wants to wash their hands, so I would just leave the tissue on the floor. Okay, so those are some examples of OCD. So what can you do about this? If you don't have OCD, please don't say, I am so OCD, because people say that, they're like, oh, I'm so OCD. Firstly, the sentence I am so OCD doesn't make grammatical sense because you're saying I am so obsessive compulsive disorder. OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. You cannot be a mental health condition unless you're dressing up as OCD for Halloween or something like that. You cannot be OCD. You can have OCD, but you cannot be OCD. So unless you have OCD, please don't say I am so OCD. And that's not because I find it offensive, that's because it trivializes OCD as a condition and it spreads more misinformation. And I've had an experience where I spoke to someone involved in welfare, I'm not going to say where or who, and they were great about other things I've spoken to them about, but when I said that I think I might have OCD, I'd just met them at this point, they were like, oh, I think I might have OCD too, because I've started using hand sanitizer all the time since this sickness bug has been going around. And whilst they could have had OCD, the fact they said it as like, oh, since this sickness bug has been going around, I've been using more hand sanitizer, that's quite a logical step. That doesn't mean you have OCD. It could be an OCD behaviour, 100% it could be an OCD behaviour, but it just didn't feel to me like it was an OCD behaviour, and it felt like they were maybe not taking my concerns as seriously as they should have done. So if we can stop trivialising OCD in just general vernacular and language, then maybe that will help with situations like that. And on that note, also educating yourself, particularly if you're someone who works in welfare or support or a leadership position, a teaching position, anything like that, then it might be helpful to take a little bit of time to learn about some of the other OCD themes. I've only really talked about 2 and there are more than that, so maybe take a little bit of time to research some OCD themes so that you can be better informed. You can maybe be more able to recognise symptoms and direct people to the appropriate support. Okay, that is it for this video. Please subscribe if you'd like to see more videos, although they probably won't be OCD related because the focus of this channel is mainly musical theatre and the performing arts. But if you do want to see more of my videos, then please do subscribe, and thank you very much for watching. Bye!